First and foremost, today there is a Mazel Tov. Today, actually, this particular Shabbos, 35 years ago, is when we first began Chabad of Agora Hills in Oak Park. It was Shabbos Matos-Masei. It was exactly 35 years ago. Myself and Rabbi Sapo, we were 22-year-old yeshiva boys, literally doing what we can to fulfill the Rebbe's vision and the Rebbe's mission. I was working then at Chabad in Westlake Village, and we decided let's take a shot at this in Agora Hills. And it was a few families that got together, and the first minyan this Shabbos 35 years ago was in someone's home. And Baruch Hashem, over the past 35 years, we have grown, we have expanded, we have opened up Chabad centers in all neighboring communities. And so a mazel tov to the entire Jewish community for 35 years of Yiddishkeit. A mazel tov to my colleague, Rabbi Sapo, and to our Rebbitzins, and to all the shluchim and shluchos that have joined us here in the Conejo Valley over the past 35 years. There will not be any indoor Shabbat services this particular Shabbos. We've been able to open up the shul starting May 29th. And unfortunately, the governor this week has announced that he wants all houses of worship to be closed for indoor services, as well as all other businesses. I'm a bit saddened by it. I'm disappointed by this decision. We were following all codes and all guidelines, keeping it very safe. Everyone wore a mask for every service. We were 6 feet apart. Chairs were set up distant from one another. But I guess that's the decision that the governor and the county have made for now. Hopefully, it will either be appealed or the governor will have a change of heart. Or let's hope that the amount of the outbreak calms down and they don't find it a necessity anymore for us to be closed. During this week, we're going to make contingency plans. We're probably going to do some type of outdoor service for next Shabbat. Friday night will probably be at the Chabad Center, and Shabbos day we're going to be looking for someone's backyard that has a very large covered patio. Again, this hopefully is all just temporary, and hopefully very soon we'll be able to go back to our safe indoor services. So I will keep you informed of that. As I mentioned in a prior email to the shul, sometime during this week, I'm going to also be calling for a town hall Zoom meeting so we can discuss programs that we're involved in for the summer, and also a preliminary discussion about the high holidays, in which I'd like to get some feedback from you as well. So right now the focus is on this week's Parsha. It's a double portion. This Shabbos is a special Shabbos. Every Shabbos is special, but this one has two additional reasons for it being special. One is that it's called Shabbos Chazak, the Shabbos that we finish one of the readings of the 5 books of Moses. Is called the Shabbos of strength. We gain strength from this. Well, this particular Shabbos, we finish the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar. And so it's Shabbos Chazak on that. It's also Shabbos Mevorchim. It's the Shabbos in which we're going to bless the new month. The new month is the month of Menachem Av. It's the month of sadness of the Jewish people. For this month, the holy temples were destroyed. But we add that word Menachem, that means comfort, that God gives us comfort during these difficult days. And we have been promised that God will turn this month of sadness into days of joy. And so the Shabbos, again, we have the power of the blessing of the entire month. And so Shabbos Chazak and the Shabbos of Mevorchim, it's a Shabbos, so we also read 2 portions, double portion, a portion of Matos and a portion of Masei. And so in this portion of Matos, the opening verses deal with the taking of a vow, the taking of an oath. Because we don't look at things as mere words. One could say, what if you say, I promise to do something? It's just a word. What's a word? It's not even a contract. It's just words that come out of your mouth. And the Torah will tell us that words have power, that words live on. And it gets into the laws of vows. And then it gets into the laws of annulling a vow, that it's not so simple. You can't simply just say, I took a vow, but big deal, I changed my mind. It doesn't work that way. There is an actual process that one has to go through to annul a vow. Most important in these discussions is the message that the Torah is conveying to us. And it's not just limited to these cases of a vow, but to our general understanding and appreciation of the power of the verbal, that words matter. One of the most famous prayers of the entire year is the prayer called Kol Nidre. Right? Everyone's familiar with those words, Kol Nidre. Even Gentiles know those words, Kol Nidre. Tonight is Kol Nidre. If you've ever read the translation of the meaning of the words, you may have noticed that it's a rather legalistic declaration of annulment of vows. Why, of all things, did our sages choose to open the services of Yom Kippur with the annulment of vows? And how is this a declaration somehow that this is the focal point of this 25-hour period devoted to the themes of repentance, of closeness to God, of forgiveness? So one commentary explains that it's meant to draw attention to the seriousness of the spoken word. See, among the four classes of nature, man is identified as a medaber. There's domem, tzomeach, chai, and medaber. There's inanimate objects that God created. There's growth, vegetation, trees and vegetables that are out there. Then there is the animal world, and then there is the medaber. The medaber is the human being. And we're called by that word medaber. What does medaber mean? Medaber means one who speaks. So the defining and distinguishing feature of the human being, of the human species, is the fact that we have the ability to speak. And thus we're called, this human creature is called the one who speaks. Because this power of speech is a divine power. We're taught that the world was created with 10 divine utterances. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God used words to create his world. He didn't say he made light. He said, "Let there be light." Yehi or. God said, "Let there be light." God used words to create his world. And in a sense, human beings can also use words to create entire worlds. We've all had the experience of reading a book and being moved. And sometimes you're so moved by what you're reading that you move to tears. And you move to tears by the fate of a character. This character may have never existed. And you know this character never really existed. So why is it that you're crying? You're crying about a character that doesn't exist. What happened? A writer took a blank piece of paper and through words alone created a person and made this person, with their skill and their talent in words, so real that these words have the ability to bring about the deepest emotion of man, to actually bring tears to your eyes, knowing full well that this character doesn't exist, but yet you cry. You cry of either happiness, or you cry of joy, or you cry of sadness, but you are so moved. Words can penetrate your soul. Words can penetrate the deepest part of your emotions. What are words called in Hebrew? Well, starting next week, we read the book of Devarim. Devarim means words, right? We use the word Devarim for words, but it doesn't only mean words. Devarim also means things. And it's telling us that words are not just air. Words are things. They are objects. They have a tangible impact and they have an effect. Words have implications. Words have consequences. Once they're said, it's not easy to take them back. You know, they say you can't force toothpaste back into the tube. Well, you can't take the words back once it comes out of your mouth. And this is a phenomenon we've seen throughout all of history, and sometimes to a catastrophic effect. In 1914, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia, which led to the outbreak of World War I, which we know was the forerunner of World War II. How many millions upon millions of lives were lost in those wars, all escalating from a series of words? In the 14th century, during Europe's devastating Black Plague, anti-Semites and others were looking for scapegoats. And they spread this rumor that it was the Jews that caused the plague by poisoning the wells. This led to the murder of tens of thousands of Jews at the hands of enraged mobs. And then there was the infamous blood libels, where Jews were accused of kidnapping and murdering Christian babies to use their blood in Passover matzah. And then, of course, the vile protocols of the elders of Zion, a late 19th century forgery that allegedly revealed how the Jews are secretly plotting to take over the world. Historians point out that it was those lies that the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, used as their warrant for the genocide of the Jewish people. Words, just words. Words used to unleash untold horrors upon horrors. But the same is also true conversely. Throughout history, there have been positive and inspiring words spoken by men and women of great stature that have uplifted entire nations, instilling a new sense of hope, of direction, of consolation, of motivation. You think of the words of the Declaration of Independence, which set forth the aspirations for human liberty, for dignity. You think of President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So we can clearly see on the macro level how words can shape events on a massive scale for good and for bad. But the same is also true in a micro level, in the day-to-day events of our individual lives. The words we speak have implications and they have consequences. The words we speak can become missiles of pain and destruction, or they can become angels of goodness and deliverance. The words we speak can hurt. The words we speak can heal. Our words serve as an interface with those outside of ourselves, because our words represent us. Our words define us. Are you a soft and sensitive person, or are you hard and crass? Is your word your bond? Is your word your honor? Are you reliable? Are you credible? Are you trustworthy? Are you a person of honesty and integrity, or are you a manipulator? Marty Teitelbaum told me that back in the day, his late father was a very successful builder and developer. And back then, he said they didn't need 300-page contracts. The parties met, they gave each other their word, they shook hands, and they proceeded with the deal on that basis. And on that basis alone, my word is my bond, my word is my honor, and that was enough. You know, sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we feel compelled to offer constructive criticism to someone. And in such situation, the Torah provides very clear guidelines. The Torah wants it done in private. Don't do it publicly. You don't need to insult someone. You don't need to embarrass someone. And it should be done gently and tenderly. And it should be very clear to the other person that your motivation is solely their own well-being and not, God forbid, any pleasure or sense of superiority that you might be deriving from putting them in their place. You see, the human being has this strange joy of putting someone down. Perhaps we feel higher ourselves if we put someone down. And so we disguise it that we're just trying to correct them. We're just trying to show them the right way, but we do so in a public-like setting or in a social media-like setting so that it goes on and on and on forever. And the Torah says you want to correct someone because you really care about them. It's a good thing to do, but do it privately. And make sure every word that you choose is sending a message to this person that you're not trying to put them in their place and you're not trying to show any sign of superiority, but that you truly care about correcting them. Someone once said that criticism is a very sharp instrument. When you criticize someone, it can cut as deeply as a surgeon's scalpel. Even the most carefully calculated and well-performed surgical incision causes a wound. So before a surgeon goes cutting someone in an attempt to heal or to alleviate the person's suffering, he better know what he's doing because he's got a dangerous instrument in his hand. Otherwise, he shouldn't be making that cut if he's not sure he knows what he's doing with it. Likewise, before we criticize our fellow, we should understand the tool that we have in our hands, that instrument that we have of our words can cause tremendous pain. So do we know how to use it? Unless we're ready to take responsibility for easing the pain and the discomfort that we can be inflicting, we should think long and hard before we just lob it out there. Like a parent who disciplines a child. A caring parent doesn't just issue a rebuke and walk away, but stands ready to invest him or herself in the child's healing and betterment. What was it that we used to hear parents say? Son, this will hurt me more than it will hurt you. It has to really hurt a parent more than it hurts a child for it to be proper discipline. There was a young mother who told a rabbi, my little boy is a bit of a troublemaker and he acts out and he misbehaves a lot and I often have to scold him. And one day he happened to have been especially good. And that night after I tucked him into bed and I started heading downstairs, I heard him crying. Now, why is he crying? I didn't yell at him. I didn't scold him. So I went back into his room and I found his head buried in the pillow. And between the sobs, he said to me, Mommy, wasn't I pretty good today? And that question went through me like a knife. I'm always so quick to correct him, to admonish him when he's out of line. And yet when he behaved nicely, I didn't make any note of it. I put him to bed without a word of praise. And look how desperately he needed it. Rabbi Tversky writes in one of his books that on a rare occasion that his father needed to discipline him for a certain behavior, the way he did it was not telling him, you were bad. How could you do such a thing? But he would simply say these Yiddish words, es passt nicht. Es passt nicht means this doesn't become you. You think about those words. The child is not being told he's a bad boy. On the contrary, he's being told that he's a person of excellence, that he's above such behavior. Even as he's being rebuked, it's not by deflating him, but by elevating him. Es passt nicht. Come on, son, you're too good for this. That's the power of words. When we use the words wisely, we can lift up even when there's a tone of rebuke. There are times where the most important words are not the words that we say, but the words we don't say. In the words of humorist Sam Levinson, he said, it's so simple to be wise. Just think of something stupid to say and then don't say it. This is especially relevant during those times that we find ourselves angry or we find ourselves upset. It's during those times that it can be most challenging, yet most important, to bite our tongues and not say the first things that come to mind. I want to share a story with you that I heard. This goes back a few decades. There was a woman by the name of Ella Adler. And she and her husband, Yaakov, they suffered a terrible tragedy that no one should ever know. Their son, Michal, he passed away 7 weeks after his bar mitzvah. Shortly afterwards, on a Friday afternoon, Ella was at the Department of Motor Vehicles with her elder daughter. She took a number and she was told to wait. And as in most the Department of Motor Vehicles, that wait can be quite long. And she was told the wait will be about 2 hours. Instead of just sitting around doing nothing, she took out her siddur, she took out her prayer book, and she started to daven. She's got 2 hours to nothing to do, so she might as well daven to Hashem. She might as well pray. She reached the Amidah during the prayers where you stand upright in silence and in solitude, and she looks around for an emptier, quieter place. So she strolls down the hallway, and sure enough, she sees there's an empty room there. And she goes inside, and she starts saying the Amidah. Naturally, given the rawness of her tragedy and the vulnerability of her state, her prayers were filled with tears. She was crying. And as she's there in the middle of this empty room, a female employee of the DMV walks in the room and she yells out, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Now, Ella is in the middle of the Amidah. We don't speak in the middle of the Amidah. So she begins to point to the siddur and to her mouth to try to mimic that she can't talk because she's praying. That's what she's trying to do to this total stranger who works at the DMV. She's trying to indicate that I can't talk. But this only got this woman more enraged. What are you showing me with your fingers, with your mouth, with this book? What are you doing in this office? Get out of here. She's in the middle of praying to God Almighty, and she's not allowed to step out of her place. She's supposed to stand literally at attention. You're talking to God. And she's trying to excuse herself to this employee with these hand motions, but the woman would have none of it. And in her fury, this DMV staffer grabs Mrs. Adler by her arm and literally and physically swung her across the room. And she landed against the wall. how many of us would lose our temper? How many of us would be looking for an attorney to file a lawsuit? You physically took a woman and tossed her across the room. But she didn't do either. In a calm voice, she said, "Why? Why did you do that to me?" And then her emotions took over, and she began crying. And she said, "You can't possibly know what I've gone through these past 2 months." And she began sobbing uncontrollably, telling this woman that she just lost her son. And she had other children at home, and all of them were going through a very difficult time. And she rarely had any time for herself to converse to God. So she was just utilizing the opportunity to recite her prayers in a quiet room. The woman still says, "Well, you don't have to pray here. Go pray somewhere else." And even then, she stayed calm. And she said, "I don't know what religion you follow, but I'm Jewish. And this is how we customarily pray to God." And then amidst her tears, she walked out of the office and she went back to the waiting area. 3 minutes later, this other woman walks out of her office, comes over to Mrs. Adler. She puts her arm around her and she says, "I'm so sorry. I am so ashamed. I don't know what's with me. I'm also Jewish. I beg you, please forgive me." And with that, they embraced and they cried together. And after wiping their tears, they had a serious conversation for several minutes more. Mrs. Adler finished her business at the DMV and left. The following week, Mrs. Adler attended a Torah study session, and after the class, she went to the rabbi to talk. And in the course of the conversation, she told him what happened at the DMV on Friday. So the rabbi says, "I think you should go back and continue a conversation with this woman. If divine providence put you together, even under the strangest of circumstances, maybe you should try to see where this conversation will lead, so go back." So the next day she went back to the DMV and she found the woman and she gave her a pamphlet on faith that she had written in the memory of her son. The woman was deeply touched and she said, "I want you to know something, Mrs. Adler. I want you to know that this past Friday night, the night of our meeting, I went to the synagogue for the first time in decades. I went to pour out my heart and to pray to God for forgiveness for my behavior to you. And then I prayed for the soul of your son. As ashamed as I am, I cannot begin to tell you what that encounter has done for me as a person and as a Jew." That's what it is, my friends. The woman could have responded in anger, and we all would agree that she would have been justified to do so. Instead, she took the words of King Solomon to heart. A soft answer turns away anger and awakens the goodness tucked beneath the hard shell of another human being. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi Baroka used to frequent the marketplace where Elijah the prophet would often appear to him. So Rabbi Baroka and Elijah would have these encounters at a particular marketplace. That's where they met up. On one of those days, Elijah pointed to two men as they were walking. And he tells Rabbi Baroka, those two, they have a special place in the shir in the world to come. They have a special place reserved for them. So after the encounter with Elijah, Rabbi Baroka goes over the two men and says, "What's your occupation? I want to know more about you guys. You guys are getting a special place in the world to come. I'm a little bit jealous. So what is it that you guys do?" And they said, we're comedians. When we see people who are depressed, we cheer them up. When we see people who are arguing, we do what we can to make peace between them. People who use their words to bring joy, to bring healing, to bring peace into other people's lives occupy a special place in the heavenly world. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he would walk down the street, he would always look for someone that he can extend a greeting to, and he would always be first, Jew and Gentile alike. Shalom, good morning, how are you? Shabbat shalom. Just so that he can express and use words to express a greeting of friendship to someone. Because words have an impact. Words affect another human being. If with your words you can help someone, you can heal someone, why not use it? There was a famous singer that had been contracted to sing at a Paris opera house. Ticket sales were booming. In fact, the night of the concert, the house was packed. Every single seat was taken. The feeling of anticipation, of excitement was in the air as the house manager takes to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your enthusiastic support. But I'm afraid due to an illness, the man you've come to hear will not be performing tonight. However, we have found a suitable substitute we hope will provide you with comparable entertainment. And the crowd groaned in disappointment. They didn't bother to hear the name of the stand-in. The mood turned from excitement to frustration to disappointment. And the stand-in performer gave it everything he had. And when he finished, there was nothing but an uncomfortable silence. No one applauded. Imagine you're the singer, you're on stage, you gave it your all, you sung your heart out. Shh, still, not a sound. And there he stood on the stage in a packed opera house, silence. And suddenly from the balcony, a little boy stands up and he yells at the top of his lungs, "Daddy, you were great!" And suddenly the applause began. And from the applause, a standing ovation. I doubt they suddenly had a change of heart. What they applauded was the simple words of a child expressing his love and devotion for his father. Words have impact. We use our words to call out to God in prayer. So let us all use our words over Shabbat in the coming days. Let us use our words, our simplistic words, to call out to our Father in heaven and beseech him to help humanity, to help the world, to heal the world, to help our country, to help our people, to help our Eretz Yisrael, to help our families. God knows how to perform miracles. He can do this. God knows how to heal. He can do this. So let's reach out to him with medaber, with the gift that he's given the human being, the gift of words. And let us plead with the Almighty, indeed, that it not just be a Shabbat Shalom, and not just a Shavua Tov, and not just a Chodesh Tov, and not just a Shana Tov, but that indeed he goes about and he brings the Geula, he brings the redemption, so that indeed there's no more suffering for all of eternity. Shabbat Shalom to all. Thank you for joining me.